Welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the place where you can learn how to create a dental practice and a business life that you love. Listen in with Dr. David Moffet as he interviews successful entrepreneurs and successful business people and successful dentists as they share their business successes, their stories, and their breakthrough ideas, sharing pearls of wisdom that you can take back to your practice and implement immediately so that you can have that great practice with more patients, higher profits, and less stress. This is the podcast where great dental practices meet with successful business processes. Thanks for tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the podcast where thought leaders, industry experts, and thriving practice owners reveal their very best tips, tools, and strategies that will help you grow your dental practice faster. Now, here's your host, Dr. David Moffet.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's Ultimate Dental Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. David Moffet, and I'm broadcasting or interviewing from down under in Australia, in New South Wales, Australia, about 2 hours out of Sydney. And I'm talking today to Dr. Richard Schlossberg, who is a retired dentist in Baltimore, Maryland, on the other side of the world and on the other side of the United States. So, Richard, welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
Fine, David. Thank you for inviting me to this very beautiful moment in your newest career.
Well, thanks, Richard, and I appreciate you joining us. And you and I met through LinkedIn, and in fact, I think you met my wife Jane through her services on LinkedIn. We got discussing as to your career, and I found your career very similar to mine in terms of running a very successful practice. And I thought that an interview on the podcast would be great for my listeners and my viewers to hear your story and find out how you ran a successful practice, a successful fee-for-service practice, and your career through dentistry and what you've seen in that career. Now, I remember you told me that you began your career as a practicing dentist in the U.S. Navy. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, so tell me about the U.S. Navy, and you're a lieutenant in the U.S. Navy. How was that for you?
Yes, that was a beautiful experience. I decided on that mode of post-dental school treatment of my career by practicing within a confined group that could give me some experience, confidence, and leadership in dentistry. And I made a very intelligent decision by doing it when I found that when I left the 2 years in the Navy, I was really ready to go on to a possible private practice.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because a lot of dentists graduate and then go and become associates in practice, and they don't really get that confidence and that leadership. And I guess the one thing that I'd learned from employing a dental assistant who had a career in the Navy was her respect of rank and the roles of leadership that she learnt while she was in the Navy. So obviously you learnt those as well.
I did, and I learned a lot from the career officers when I mentioned that I was considering going out into private practice and find my niche in a private practice. I was not going to open my own practice initially, so I went in as an associate in a practice of a gentleman who had been in practice ahead of me for about 40 years.
All right. And how was that when you went to work for him?
I thought initially it was going to be a wonderful experience because he had been in practice for a lot of years, had a very successful practice going forward. But it was in a different time as far as dental insurances, no dental insurances, and people's availability of money then. It was all fee for service, no insurance, and people came in and did the work that you treatment plan them for. But I may suggest that when you do something like that and establish yourself as an associate in a practice, make sure that you have the proper advisors going into the associateship of that practice. I'm not talking about going out on your own immediately. I'm talking about if you think you've got confidence, go in with a contract with the older established dentist. And I did, and I ran into a problem.
Can you
And I
can you
may
share that
establish,
problem?
I'm sorry.
Can you share that problem?
Well, I was in a contract for 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, it said that I was going to be an equal partner in the practice because we were moving the practice during that period of time. And once we moved it, we were enlarging the practice, and I was going to have an all new dental practice as far as equipment and as far as software of computers, which were coming out at that time. And it sounded like a great deal. But at the end of those 5 years, when the contract came due, and the letter came due of what he had signed, it was not what was supposed to be. What it was 50% partner, but it was not identified that the pension was part of that 50%. And that's a very big entity with a general practitioner who's been in practice for 40, 50 years and looking to get out. They're looking to have as much money put away for them as they can towards the end of their career in a pension. I did not get that opportunity through this end of this contract. So I wound up terminating the contract and going on my own, not too far away, because I had no restrictions once that contract was void.
Oh, that would have been a bit of a tangent for you, a bit of a change of plans. How did you go with that change of plans? How was that for you?
I had so much confidence in myself and what I did in that practice for the 5 years and the following of patients. I had no problem because I had been thinking about it for a while if that happened. And I had no problem establishing myself in my own physical plant with the way I wanted things set up with my own team members. I was going through dentistry early on, practicing by objective in everything I wanted from dentistry, economically and confidence wise. And I wanted to hear it and see it from my patients and my team. So I had to establish that with all of them, and I did, and it went forward for the next 47 years.
That's a big shift, Richard, because you came from the Navy, where you're part of a, a crew and a team of officers as well as enlisted men, and then you've gone into a partnership arrangement in a dental practice with as an associate. So you've got some camaraderie there in both those situations. Then all of a sudden you're out on your own as your own boss, and then putting together a new team. How did you manage that? How did you manage putting together a new team when you decided to go on your own?
Well, the way I established my team is that I ran some ads and word of mouth through the community of who I was looking for to be part of my new practice. And coming out of my old practice, two people that worked for me there asked me if they could leave that practice and come work for me. And I did not accept them early on because I would not do that. They said, well, we will quit here. We will write a letter to that doctor and say we're quitting if you don't electively take us. They wound up coming with me, and they wound up having some friends who were very, very popular in the dental community who came in with me. And I had my hygienist, I had my front desk, I had my assistant, and I was off and running. And to later on establish a larger practice and add on to that practice with what I was building from the infancy of everything. But I may mention, when you do this and go out on your own, whether it's out of dental school or out of where I came from, you want to make sure that you have professionals that are on your side, that are advisors, financial advisor, accountant, lawyer, maybe a coach. But you need these people to take you from the get-go, go forward, and establish yourself the right way, knowing me.
Yeah, really, really important to make sure that you do have a team of trusted advisors behind you. We'll come back to that. What I wanted to talk to you about too was, and you've told me this, so I'm jumping forward to bring this up, is that through your career as a practice owner, you had a very, very stable team of employees with you who stayed with you for a very, very, very long time. How did
Mm-hmm.
you maintain that culture? How did you build that culture and maintain that culture to maintain that loyalty with those team members?
I established early on in my private practice, excuse me, an ability to write a manual for the operations of my practice. My team members knew everything about that manual. It was about them in their individual capacities and about the practice, about my objectives and going forward. I went out on a limb early on, David, and gave them benefits that some people do not give, that do not even look forward to sharing with their team members parts of the practice. I did. And that's talking about going to courses, going on trips, which are dental related, going to Las Vegas, going on cruises, and closer to home with the practice, we celebrated Christmas parties, we have celebrated birthdays, we celebrated the success of the practice as we went on. They were my biggest advocates in developing and maintaining my practice because these were people, my team members, who were very tightly organized with the community that my practice was in. It's a very tight community.
Yeah, very, very lucky to find employees like that, Richard, and then to nurture them and hold on to them. One of the things I hear and I see from some employees, and I meet them away from their practice, and they say, "Oh, I'm not interested in growing a practice," even though they're employees. And I think, well, I wonder if their employer knows that. In fact, I was just talking to somebody on LinkedIn the other day, and they said, "I'm not interested in growing a practice." I said, "Oh, you must be working for a government-run
Mm-hmm.
clinic." She said, "No, I work for 3 or 4 privately run clinics, but the marketing is done by somebody else, and I'm not interested in that." And I'm thinking, how do you sell yourself as a hygienist to your patients to build the trust and relationship for them to keep coming back to see you?
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise you're really just a mechanical tooth cleaner and nothing else. I found that quite a scary concept to think that there are practices where those sort of people are able to work without being committed to helping the practice become a better version of what it was last week, what it was a month ago, what it was a year ago.
Right.
Always thinking to grow the practice. So congratulations to you, because as you said, you were in that one location for 47 years,
Mm-hmm.
and you had long-term staff, and obviously the benefits of being part of a team that celebrated its successes and went to conferences in Vegas and celebrated birthdays and celebrated Christmas and things like that. That's a great environment to work in.
They were some of my largest advocates for my practice, along with specialists that I referred to out of the practice, seeing my patients, sending my patients back to restore the work that they've just done. They were the biggest advocates, that group. They always were talking to each other and up about the practice. That was it.
Yeah.
Always positive.
Yeah, and it's a compliment to you that the specialists were seeing the work that you were doing on their patients and knowing that the work that they were doing for them was going to be protected by the good dentistry that you were doing. So that's always nice to know when the specialists think or another dentist thinks that you're a doer of good dentistry and as well as being a good business operator. And that's another reason why they refer back. Richard, let's talk about um, communication with patients during your career and patient care because they kind of go hand in hand. We as dentists we have seen patients walk into our office who have you wonder how the dentistry's actually stayed there and you say who did this dentistry? Oh, I went to Dr. Bob Jones, he's the greatest guy. And you think, well, he's obviously a magician because I don't know how that stuff stayed there. It wasn't really built on sound foundations, but they loved Bob's so much that this wasn't causing them any pain, but it's not good dentistry. Let's talk about communication and patient care in your practice. How was that? Because you can't run a fee for service practice if you're not a good communicator, and your skill level is below average. That's for sure. Because you're eventually you're going to churn patients out because the dentistry just keeps falling out.
That communication started on the phone with my front desk team members who welcomed the patient on for whatever reason they called that office. It then was followed up with them walking in the office and the team members greeting them, talking to them about anything but dentistry. But then they do get involved slowly into why they're there. The next one is the dental assistant who brings that patient back to whatever location they're going to and greeted again. Hygienist. My hygienist was there. She was probably there 42 years. 42 years. She was one of my biggest advocates anywhere. She worked on them for at least 3/4 to an hour of time of hers, and they requested her or the other hygienists to see them. They had confidence in what she was doing, and they know that over the years, they did not have problems. They did not have problems where the patients needed to run to a periodontist because they weren't properly being treated. Like some of my friends who didn't have a hygienist did it themselves, and the rest speaks volumes sometimes, where the time is not spent, again, training the patient with a smile, with quality work, with treatment plans that are quality, that are accepted, and they see why they're getting that type of work. That is the way I communicated, and show and tell. And show and tell. Work I've done, the work they need, here it is, here it was. They know, they see it. It's right in front of them.
Mm.
And when you have repeat patients, which we all did over that period of time, they know when they come back into the practice, well, I think I need that procedure again. What was that called? A cap, a crown? Let's take a look. And we took a look, gave them a mirror, or we scanned it, let them take a look at it. Yes, I think that is what you need. Fine. They already know your fee. They know what you're going to do. They know how long it takes. And they're going to get the same quality care. That's why they returned. That's why they returned.
Yeah, it's all about the care and the communication, isn't it? I remember a patient coming back to me and saying, he said, "I thought you'd crowned all my back teeth, but I've broken another one, and so I figure I need another crown." And he'd broken the lingual cusp on a lower premolar that had a, a DO restoration in it. And I said, "You know what? That tooth is now going to be more than half filling. We better protect it. You're right." And he knew from, in fact, that was the chap who came to me as a 65-year-old because his dentist had retired, and after restoring all his teeth at the back, which had not been crowned with crowns, he said, "My teeth have never felt stronger." He said, "I'm so glad I came to you because I can now eat what what I wasn't able to eat before, because now I can really
Right.
do it. And so it's not just making his teeth look beautiful, but made them functional. And
Absolutely.
and so that communication is really, really important, in helping those people get the dentistry that they need, that allows them to live a healthier life as well. That's the important thing.
Exactly. How many times I had a patient call the front desk saying, my root canal fell out. My root, they thought they had a root canal in their mouth, and they did, but it was a crown. It wasn't the root canal. And then they see the understanding, and what we're showing them is that they're confident. Go ahead, do the procedure that you did. Everything's fine.
Yeah, lovely. Richard, you mentioned at the start that you began in a fee for service practice. You began your practice as a fee for service practice as well, and obviously in the days when insurance in dentistry was in its infancy, and now insurance is rampant in dentistry. How do you see the landscape now for younger dentists, and even dentists who are tied in insurance contracts, as opposed to how it was for you when you were in a fee for service practice?
I think now the dental students coming out and graduating have to understand that the time when you and I came out of dental school, we could establish ourselves on a corner somewhere and be successful. Now, demographics is everything, and having somebody with you who understands where you're considering going and what you're considering doing in that area. You have to understand that these dental service organizations and massive groups are everywhere. They're everywhere. We've got an Aspen Dental, they're called, that is opened many years ago right now from scratch with a great deal of backing, and they've encroached on all areas. I know in this area of Baltimore they are. And I often wondered, how are they doing this? How are they doing this? Their fees are not high, but they're doing something. But I really feel that a dentist coming out who really wants to go on his own or go out and earn some money is two different things. Going on your own is going to be very difficult early on. It really is to establish yourself. So you really do need a niche to drive those patients in with you and make them understand, I've never heard of that. Let's get into it. What is this? What is this you're advocating? Such as a little thing like sedation dentistry. If you have training, whether it's in the service, whether it's a general practice residency for a year after dental school, you've gotten yourself involved in elaborating on what you weren't taught in dental school. Doing that, it really may help you a great deal. Create your niche and location, and then see through advice of others if that's a good move or bad move for you versus going in with an organization that will pay you outright as you work rather than the liabilities that you already have and add to them.
Yeah, the DSOs have changed the landscape too for dentists wanting to do startups, because from my understanding, the DSOs are so cashed up, they're willing to pay overs for rent, so that a startup dentist, a single dentist like you or I, just can't match the dollars that the DSO is going to put into you know to that area. Every time there's a new shopping development, oh, we need a dentist. Well, the DSOs just go bang. We'll pay this. We'll take this much space, and we'll pay this. And it's they know that the solo dentist or even a partnership that's located nearby can't match those dollars, and so they create a monopoly. It's really difficult for the young dentist starting up to do a startup these days.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, very, very tough. Um, What do you think is the, I guess, the key for a dentist? We've spoken about maintaining long-term relationships and having patients, who started off as children in our practice, become adults in our practice, bring their children and even their grandchildren to our
Hmm.
to our practice.
Hmm.
What's the key in building those sort of relationships between us as the dentists and those patients that stay forever and get the dentistry done that they need to, and refer family, friends, and acquaintances to be your patients as well? What's the key in building that relationship?
You can still do that. It's not a problem. But the key word there is from the start communication. You can't change in midstream. If you're going out and starting up a practice, you have to go in with established guidelines and practice by objective of what you want in your own practice. And I'm talking about the way it's physically set up and the way it's going to be emotionally set up with your communication barriers, with your patients. Your patients will take the information from you to their family members, to their community. Your communication is going to take it from your specialists, who early on you're using, to others that are going to send patients to you. It's always happened to me, and it will happen to new ones. But they have to have that communication, that organization of their team, the appearance and their communication standards of talking to patients. Long and the short of it.
Yeah, I'm finding that with my clients too, that the clients that communicate well, and even in the same practice where we have one dentist who's a very good communicator, they have a very low fail to attend rate for their patients that have made an appointment, and a very low cancellation rate. And yet in the same practice, we have another clinician who is a poor communicator with um, patients, uh, very introverted, or very um, C type in terms of disc profile. They're more into the how than the communication, and they've got high fail to attends from people that they've seen. They've got low um, show up rates for people who have scheduled 6 months in advance for a checkup, even. So they haven't even been able to sell the importance of the 6 monthly visit way back when, and yet they keep asking, and then they have high cancellation rates as well. So they've failed to attend rates high, cancellation rates high, and and long term, recare failures as well.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they keep asking the principal, oh, you just need to give me more new patients. Well, there's definitely a communication. It's almost that they need to sit down and read Dale Carnegie's book, um, not once but twice. Maybe Robert Cialdini's book as well, not once but twice, just to learn those
Right,
communication skills of how to be interesting. But to be interesting, there's only one thing that you have to do, and that's be interested in them. If
right,
you ask questions, they'll think
right,
you're the most interesting person of all, because they get to talk about their favorite subject, your patient,
right.
which is themselves.
I never, ever talked over a patient. When I'm talking to my assistant, it's either with hand signs in back of the patient in some way or a note maybe, but I've never talked over the patient at the chair, always around them. The patient is the center of focus when they're there. They are the center of focus, and they know it and they realize it. Hygienists and my end of the practice, we always made notes in the file, in the computer, about the patient. Maybe they had a hobby. Maybe they had an incident at home that went on. But I can have the ability to go back and look at their chart when they've returned and ask them about that incident. What does that do? It reinforces in here to them, we're interested in them. We're concerned about them. And we talk to them about previous work. How is this doing? How is so and so doing that we recently worked on?
Yeah, I remember we had a couple. They were in our practice. They were 3 or 4 years older than me, and their daughter-in-law was notified that she was having a stillborn baby, and he just rang up. He had a crown to be issued. The patient, and he just rang up and said, "Look, I can't make my appointment. I'll ring you back." And we go, "Oh, there's something's really wrong there." And anyway, when his wife came in, she was talking with Jane, and we were sharing that story with her, and she goes, "Oh," she all of a sudden she just said to Jane, she goes, "Oh, it's just hit me." She said, "I always just thought of you guys as my dentists, but you're not. You're our friends."
Mm-hmm.
In the way we were reaching out to them and sharing our experience of that as well. And it's always looking for common interest, but common interest that you then still hearing their story. Your patients really want it. They know when you believe that they're a person and not just a tooth and a credit card. That's
Right.
they can tell if you're treating them as a set of teeth and a credit card.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be off, because
Yep.
dentistry is a grudge buy, and if they're not feeling the love, they'll go somewhere else. That's for sure.
Right.
Richard, what's the biggest lesson that you learned in 47 years of dentistry? A lesson in being a dentist and a lesson for life in general as well. There's two. There's the double barrel question. What's the biggest lesson that you learned?
Biggest lesson, I think, was communication with everybody, and to make sure that the dentistry you did or anything you did was right, and it wouldn't return to haunt you with something down the road that has to be either redone or wasn't done right, or something you said that maybe you shouldn't have said that to a team member, and hold your tongue for a little while, because it will harbor with them if you said something that may be just not totally right. But I learned to stay on time, to communicate, and to treat the patients as I would like to be treated. And in those components, it worked. Staying on time, big advocate.
Yeah, punctuality is a real important thing, and again, in coaching, I see this often where the associate dentist is late to work, coming in after the patient, which is not a good look. For the first
Right,
patient of the day or the first
right,
patient after lunch, you want to make sure that you're there ready, and really, really important to respect patients' time. A friend of mine used to say that his father used to say, "If you're not 15 minutes early, then you're late," and that's a really important motto to live by. I learned it from a patient of mine who was a medical rep, and I remember going out to her one day and saying, "I really apologise, I'm running behind." And she said, "Look," she said, I'm used to working with doctors and calling on doctors. I'm used to just sitting in one of these waiting rooms all day sometimes to try
right,
and get an opportunity." Some people don't mind it, but people will respect you if you're always on time. And
mm-hmm.
I think as a golfer, Richard, if you miss your tee time, that's it.
That's it.
The plane doesn't
That's
wait for
it.
you. The train doesn't wait for you. If
No,
you're running behind, you've got to
no.
be there on time. And
Yeah,
you've got, and as the owner, you've got to set the example too. You've got to, obviously you can't be the first to open up because there's things that need to be done, but you still got to be there before the patients, and
right.
you've still got to be there at the end,
Yep,
um, as much as possible, unless you've got an important meeting to go to. But
right.
but to be seen running out the door while the patient's still in the office with the scheduler, I think that's not a good look either. Yeah, really, really important. And again, that's the same thing with attending family parties and things like that. My mother was incredibly late all the time. She was renowned for her lateness, as is my sister. But I love them dearly. But we always know to allow a little bit of extra leeway when they're traveling. Uh,
Absolutely.
it's funny. A friend of mine used to say that when he lived close to the university, he was always late. But when he had to travel an hour to the dental hospital, he was always early. And I find that sometimes can be it too. The closer you are in location, sometimes you say, "Oh, I'll only be a minute late," but it really is important to make sure that you are on time. I think that's a good lesson for everybody. And we all know our D-type patients who are always they don't even want to be sitting in your waiting room. They want to be, we'll walk in
That's
at 9 o'clock, bang, get me in my chair.
that's exactly right. Their time is as important as your time.
Mm.
And everybody understands that. The team members, the patient, you going forward. The whole thing, again, is another word, appearance. Appearance. The patient walks in that practice. What are they looking at? They're looking at what you've established. Is it your team members? Is it the appearance of the office? Is it the way you talk to patients? Is it how you greet the patients? Is it how you ask for money? It's all important and is entwined in the ball rope. It all works together. You need it.
Yeah, you reminded we had a receptionist for a long time. First thing she would ask the patient after they came out from having their treatment was she'd ask them for the money. And I'm going, that's not working. That's the last thing you should be doing. It's like, how was your treatment today? All right, now well, let's see what Dr. Moffet says. All right, we need to make an appointment for this and for this, and then we settle the money as the last thing. But if we make it look like we're going for the money first,
Right.
the patient will go, gee,
Right.
I don't even know which way is up. I've been lying on my back for an hour, and all of a sudden I'm a bit dizzy, and you're just asking for my credit card, sends the wrong message. That, Richard, is just a system that you have in your office. Tell us about some of the systems that you established and how important systems are in establishing a really good dental practice.
Well, my systems, first of all, in establishing the computer with the software that I had, it had the ability to send notifications throughout the general practice for any reason that it had to, whether through reminding patients of hygiene appointments, reminding patients of post-op appointments, reminding patients of schedules. The office may be closed for a reason or different reasons like that. All of it was established the way I needed it to flow properly. But, you know, the system sitting at the chair or a hygiene chair, showing and telling, showing patients what we're doing. This is what we're going to be doing, communicating to them, and not letting them really know when you're going to numb them up, what we're doing. The assistant is sitting there, having worked with you for years, knows what you're going to say to the patient, how you're going to treat them, where you are at the end of the conversation, and going forward. Or when you're not in the room, my system was that my assistant would sit at the chair for them a little while to let the patient unwind. They've probably been a little tense, looking forward to that appointment, and when they come into the appointment, what they're looking for and what they're going to gain from being there. Because so many times, again, systems in the office, we used to call patients routinely after larger procedures. We used to sometimes send the patients, after some orthodontic work or cosmetic work, pictures of before they started and when they finished with a thank you. Sometimes flowers, sometimes a mug. It depended on the particular patient and what we thought their interests were. And all that worked. I used to leave the office at the end of the day or during the day with the staff. It was an important patient that had somebody just pass away. And the funeral was that day. We went to the funeral. It was somebody who really established themselves in the practice as the quality patient that we wanted.
Yeah,
It really did.
it's all about relationships and making sure that your systems back up the kind of person that you are, And I remember patients used to remark how how pleasant it was for them to see myself and my dental assistant handing instruments but not having to ask. It's just you knew what each other was doing. Like Torval and Dean skating, eh, they knew exactly when to jump and when they were going to be caught and when to turn. They didn't say, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to spin now." Everything was done. Everything was choreographed. And
Right.
patients appreciated that. The last thing I think a patient really wants is to hear you and your assistant talking about, the game last night or what you got planned for the weekend while you're meant to be concentrating on not slipping in their mouth. I think that sometimes I've had, temporary staff come in and ask questions, and I go, we're not discussing that here. We're here for
Right.
this patient. They're paying for our time, and they want to feel that they're getting our 100%. And if they feel that they're not, guess what? They're going to feel that we've taken too long. And if you ask any patient whether they would like you to take longer or less time, they just say, as quick as possible. Do you want a 40-minute appointment or a 20-minute appointment to do this? They never say, is it cheaper? They just go, 20-minute. Yeah, just get me out quicker. If you're faster, doc, just get me out quicker. I'd much rather be out quicker. And so time is there. Time and respect is really important for those patients. Now, Richard, one of the things that you mentioned to me is you're doing some work with the University of Maryland, helping undergraduates. Can you tell me about that? What's going on with that?
Sure. Uh, in this county where I am in Baltimore, the University of Maryland has a clinic that they've established in a medical office, and they rotate 2 or 3 seniors in dental school through the clinic. It changes every 2 weeks, these students. And when they come through there, I'm there to monitor their work, answer questions for them, and going forward, they want to know what should they be looking for. Last week they did the same thing. We had some time on our hands, and I asked them, "What are your dreams? What are you looking for when you graduate dental school? Where are you going? What are you going to do?" Some of them say, "I don't know," and this is their senior year at dental school. Fine. What would you do? They asked me. And that led me right into all this, which was beautiful. So I was able to really give them some information. But I basically monitor them, talk to them about any subjects that come up, and see how they're doing. And if there's something that we need to tweak, like not removing the decay, and they asked me for okay to go ahead and do a filling on the tooth now, I say, I just am very diplomatic, take the mirror and the Explorer, have them say, let me let you just look at this area. I don't tell them what it is or anything with the patient, but they can see what I was pointing out. And sometimes they go in the hall and thank me for the way I handled it. And they go back in, do it. They haven't made that mistake again, which is wonderful. But things come up. Things come up, and we answer questions for them. And a lot of them are interviewing with dental service organizations. They're being given an interesting proposition that the dental service organization will be glad to sign them up for a contract for a period of time and pay their liability of dental school back. But they have to stay with the program with the DSO for the proportion period of time. But I advise them, get a lawyer, get an accountant. It's a short period of time. It could be a big mistake, or it could be very advisable for you to do it. And
Yeah,
that's basically how I treat them.
I, I think you're acting as a trusted advisor for these students, giving them advice for the real world, which sadly sometimes is lacking for
Yes.
them when they leave university. They're basically given their degree, and it's like, good luck finding work. And when we say work in that sort of situation, it's not really work. It's really further education in the school of hard knocks. And sometimes that school of hard knocks can be the school of being taken advantage of as well. I remember a colleague. I remember I went for a job interview in my final year. It was held. It was held on a Sunday, and it was quite funny because it was at a house um, in Sydney's eastern suburbs. This dentist from the country was staying there, and he'd organised 3 interviews in a row. So when I came out from mine, there was another dentist friend of mine there to go in, and I didn't know he was going for the interview, and he didn't get it, and another dentist got it. But the guy who got the job, and we thought this was a really good job up in the country, only lasted 6 months, and he said it was like a prison sentence. And from there, he then moved to a big country city, and stayed there. Got a good job in a group practice and stayed there. Became a partner in that practice, but landed on his feet. But so many of us ended up as cannon fodder as new graduates. Take the first job you can get, and not really that good a job once you realize it.
Well, I think you and I, when we graduated, did not have 5 minutes of post dental school training about where to go, what to consider doing, who with, where, and how. This is why what you're doing and advocating through this program is advisable and priceless to these graduating seniors, and programs that are advocated positive they don't know anything about. These poor kids are coming out about $400,000 in debt. And last week I was talking to one. They don't know what they're going to do. They can't begin to be an associate, or even they can go into a DSO, but they're getting paid almost minimal on the dollar they're earning.
Yeah, you mentioned that some of the DSOs are actually taking on to help these students when they become employees repay some of their debt.
Yes, one of them told me 2 weeks ago that they interviewed. I don't know where it was. It was here, in somewhere in the local area, with a DSO that put on the table that if you work for us, I think it was 5 years or 6 years, they will pay their debt back to dental school or wherever it is involving dentistry. They will pay it back.
Wow.
But you have to stay with the program. You have to stay with them.
Yeah. So, if another opportunity arises, which is too good to refuse, sadly, because you're in a contract, you've got to refuse.
And they will go after you and ask you for the money back that they gave you.
Of course. Well, it's a breach of contract. That's
right.
Yeah. The law is the law. You mentioned earlier too about having those trusted advisors and being wise before the event. And sadly, I'm seeing this in stories like this where dentists are selling practices, but it's a loaded gun for the buyer. I've seen situations where the seller of the practice is also the owner of the real estate, so they become the landlord, and the buildings run down, and of course the buying dentist hasn't done a building inspection, and all of a sudden they're up for repairs of a building, and yet they've got no equity in the building. Yeah, that's a bit rough.
Right.
Another one I'm hearing is that the selling dentist says they'll stay on, but they want to stay on not at industry average percentage. They want a premium to stay on, yet they're going to be leaving. So it's kind of like they're selling you the restaurant, but they want to eat all the gravy on the way out. I think it's got to be a win-win situation in the sale. And as soon as I see a relationship where I smell that the selling dentist is trying to take advantage of the naivety of the buying dentist, my radar's up, and I don't think that's ethical. I don't think it's moral, and I don't want to see that happen, to an unsuspecting purchaser who's put their life so far into a dental degree and then putting more money up, and all of a sudden it's kind of like, oh gee, I've been fleeced. It happened to me
Yep.
when I bought my practice. The purchaser, the vendor told me he was retiring. He went and worked for a practice near his home, and guess what? Every patient that was a family friend lived near his home, so they were loving it. They all went to see him over there. Half the practice just disappeared straight away, and I didn't know that at all. And I was left with empty books, and I'm going, what the heck have I got here? I was working emergencies and build it up and build it up, but he did say to me, he said that he didn't enjoy being an employee in that practice, and he wished that he just stayed where he was and wound it down slowly. So I guess that was a little bit of moral justice there, but still, I didn't feel any love towards him as a result of finding that out once
Sure.
I was in there. I was disappointed.
There's a lot in dentistry that can change and make it much, much easier for everybody to get along in a new associateship, in a new practice, new area, buying a practice, selling a practice. They have to be upfront. You have to be upfront with what's there. You really do. And that's what I pushed for these students that I see. Make sure, be advised what you're seeing and taking to somebody is what you're actually seeing and feeling. When I left this practice, that I had a signed contract, that first associateship, and I went out, it was in 81. Do you remember, you may not, what the interest rates were in 81? About 21%. To go to the bank and get a loan, your first loan really, unless you bought a house or something before that, your first 21% to go establish something that you've not set foot or day one in to try and earn $1.
Yeah, you're paying back a fifth of it each year just in interest. That's a killer, isn't it? It was those were crazy years. The 80s were crazy years in terms of inflation. Richard, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. How can viewers and listeners to this podcast get in touch with you and learn more from your experiences?
Well, you may contact me at my email, which is capital RSCHLOS114@gmail.com.
All right. Well, we'll put that in the notes after the podcast, and that's the easiest way. You've also got a LinkedIn profile, and you're also an educator on the advancemyce.com platform as well, so that'll be on there. Richard, it's always a pleasure talking with you and hearing the story of your journey through dentistry and the successes that you've had. And the successes are, be a genuine person. And if you are a genuine person, what you give out, you will get back in spades in terms of relationships in business, as well as in with customers, with employees, and with friends. So, Richard Schlossberg, thanks again for being a guest on the Ultimate Dental Podcast.
David, thank you very, very much. Great talking to you.
Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you for being a part of our dental community and joining us each week on this incredible journey. If you found value in today's episode and you don't want to miss out on future episodes packed with expert insights and actionable strategies, here's how you can stay connected with us. Firstly, hit that subscribe button. Whether you're listening on your favorite podcast platform or watching on our website, Subscribing ensures you'll never miss an episode. Secondly, share the love. If you know a fellow dentist or colleague who could benefit from the wisdom and knowledge that we share here, please share our podcast with them. Also, please share the podcast on your socials by simply clicking on the social icons wherever you view or listen to this podcast. Together, we can all do our bit to elevate the dental profession. And finally, stay engaged with us. We love hearing from you. Your questions, comments, and feedback fuel our mission to provide the best content for your professional growth, your personal growth, and for your practice growth. Remember, your journey to creating a dental practice and a business life that you love is our mission, and we're excited to be your trusted guide along the way. Thank you for being a part of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Until next time, keep smiling, keep striving, and keep on tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast.